Hello, and thank you for joining us for this episode of AMA's Marketing Ad. I'm your host, Bennie F. Johnson, AMA CEO. In our episodes, we explore life through the lens of marketing, delving into the conversations with individuals that flourish at this intersection of marketing and the unexpected. We'll introduce you through this series to visionaries whose stories you might not have heard of, but are exactly the ones you need to know. Thought-provoking conversations that will help us unravel the challenges, triumphs, and pivotal moments that have been shaped by marketing. Today, my special guest is Katie Goldstein. Katie joined SuperAwesome in 2021, which at the time was a part of Epic Games, to head up all things compliance. Katie currently serves as the Global Head of Policy and Regulatory Affairs. In this role, she oversees the matters that relate to kids' online privacy and safety. And she also manages SuperAwesome's educational arm, which is a training program designed to help developers, marketers, and agencies navigate the complex compliance, regulatory, and industry standards for kids' digital media ecosystem. Prior to joining SuperAwesome, she worked at the Children's Advertising Review Unit as a privacy and advertising attorney. Katie has incredibly deep understanding of compliance challenges that face the industry. She has been a sought-after thought leader and has extensive knowledge of the complex international privacy landscape, including extensive experience in Children's Online Privacy Protection Act and many other regulations. Katie has written many guides and best practices for outlets, including U.S. News and World Report, Parent Magazine, Forbes, as well as SuperAwesome's own blog. Today, it's a great pleasure to bring to our podcast, Katie from SuperAwesome. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a delight to have you here and to spend some time talking not only about your journey and the work that you do, but this important nexus of marketing and children online. We know that we mentioned before, a lot of times we talk big about brand and marketing and privacy, but we gloss over kids and teens. But talk to me a bit about what brought you to SuperAwesome and this work that you do with kids and teens online.
Yeah, so my career started at the Children's Advertising Review Unit, KRU, which is kind of the quasi-regulator of advertising. Their mission is to help companies comply with their guidelines that they have, as well as the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So I had front row seat to how the regulatory side works. We got to work with the FTC and, really get a good understanding of why these regulations are in place. Kids are, more vulnerable, and the KRU guidelines really aim to help companies ensure that their ads to them are not misleading or inappropriate. But I think that at the heart of it is really this understanding that kids are an important audience, and teens as well, that need to be addressed and, treated with respect. But KRU helps make sure that brands are doing that responsibly. And so it was a really natural fit when I moved over to SuperAwesome, whose mission is to make sure that the internet is safer for kids and teens, because, I had the benefit of getting to work with so many companies wanting to do the right thing. So when I moved over to the business side, it was a natural fit because their missions are aligned. And I was really hired to make sure that their gold standards, which they had set, continued to evolve as the market evolves. As we know, the metaverse, there's AI, there's all these different things. And so making sure that SuperAwesome is staying ahead of the curve so that they can help make sure that everything that they design, create is compliant with anything, with regulations that exist or with ones that may not exist yet that could in the future. But I think that it's a really unique place being at SuperAwesome because we work across so many different types of companies. We basically work with anyone who wants to reach a child or teen audience. And so that can be food and bev advertising, that can be networks trying to promote new movies, it could be toy advertisers. And so we have the benefit of really seeing best practices and what works, and we're able to take that in, learn from it, and use it in our new campaigns to make sure that everything that we have, that our output is really like the most not just safe and compliant, but also the most effective. So I think I've always really been interested in making sure that things online for kids are appropriate, safe, everything. And now I'm a mom. And so,
Right.
been a mom for a little bit. I do have a 7-year-old, but it was really interesting transition, the way that you get to, have this little focus group at home and see
Right.
how they react to things and how they understand it. So it's been a fun journey and evolution for me as a person and lawyer.
It's really interesting. We think about it, all the work that SuperAwesome has done in a short period of time. It's only been a decade in which, it's like 2013, which we started looking at kind of a central problem of kids having access to digital media and thinking how many problems have grown from that in the last 10 years that you've been a part of solving, and going from that essential problem to now, I think at last count, you're over 300 brands that focus on kids that have worked with SuperAwesome today.
Yeah, about 3 years ago when I started, we also started focusing on teens,
Right.
because what we've seen is really like the evolution of data privacy laws and age appropriate design codes have really started focusing on under 18 and making sure that advertising is safe and effective for them as well. And so it's been really interesting to see. It's a very different group, I think, teens from young kids.
It's really kind of interesting that you focused on that. It's like the fastest growing spaces in there. As we have lots of brand leaders who listen to our podcast and are in the conversations, what advice or areas of interest would you offer for these brand leaders that they need to make sure they're thinking about when they do work targeting teens?
So I think that there's a lot, but I think that the first thing to recognize is I think kids and teens are really distinct audiences, but that they are worthy of marketing to them directly, not just to parents. We have a research and insights team under our roof, and they do a ton of research on how much their decisions are affecting the family's decisions, and from everything from the cereal you're buying to the car that's being purchased. I know
Right.
you're a dad as well, and my 4 and 7-year-old rule everything in our house. But I think that because these laws, and globally, but even on a state level, there has been such a big focus around
Right.
kids and teen well-being online. And so I think that it is very important that you are, coloring in the lines, so to speak, and making sure that you are aware of all of the regulation that might apply to you depending on what you're doing. There are data privacy laws. There are these new age appropriate design codes. We saw the first one come out a couple of years ago in the UK, and we're seeing that copied around the United States. California passed one. It's currently stuck in litigation, but I think that even practically the effect of the UK's law had a big impact on companies needing to think about how they're designing their products. And the basis of that is really making sure that they're taking into account kids' best interests. And so that means when you're designing any product, that you need to make sure that you're not designing it so that's going to foster excessive engagement where the kid's going to feel like they can't come off of there. You want to make sure that your privacy settings are defaulting to the most privacy protective one. You don't want to have kids going in there not realizing that their profiles are public. There's all kinds of things in that law, making sure that there aren't dark patterns, no endless scroll. So I think a lot of things when you're designing products, but it really extends to every area of marketing. I think that when you're working with influencers and creators, you have to think about how they're disclosing
Right.
things, and you need to think about in gaming, which has become so central to kids and teens daily lives, that if you are creating some kind of activation for your brand within a game or creating your own game, that you want to be thinking about all of these laws and how that applies to them.
It's interesting, as we'll pick up on the point of gaming before, because gaming represents its entertainment, its education, and community all clustered together for kids and audiences, which I think opens up a lot of those digital landmines of how you're designing and building a space in there. One of the things that I've been really interested is SuperAwesome in your work there. You provide a lot of resources for brands and marketers to be able to navigate some of these spaces. I was taken aback by how you've been creating safe ways for brands to work with teen influencers to actually have safeguards for both the influencers and the brand and the audience. So talk a bit about how you think about building these safe spaces so that they're still enterprise, but in a way that is respectful, protective, and in keeping with our contemporary practices.
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to influencers, we have a specific team where that is what their focus is on all the time, is finding those creators, vetting creators that are going to be appropriate. As you can imagine, these are just kids and teens and families. And so the opportunity for someone to go rogue is there. And so
Right,
we
right.
have these teams that work with talent, that have kind of sourced talent that they have worked with again and again, and that we have trained. And we actually have something called the Safe Fam Pledge, where we have creators that we work with basically agree to abide by like a code of conduct and certain standards that we have. They can be anything from how you're going to make appropriate disclosures that a certain post is advertising, and you have to say it in audio, you have to say it in video, you have to show it in the description, you have to have it in the thumbnail, and that varies from platform to platform. And so obviously thinking about all of that, but also we think about when a parent is working with a child and they are the talent, that we try to explain to the parent, like, don't keep them up past 11, don't keep them up really late during the week when you're filming. And so we try to work with them also, that if they write to us and say, my kid has the flu, this deadline is going to get pushed. We have really good relationships with the creators, the brands, so that we can make sure that things get done. But again, that kids' best interests are preserved in doing that. And I think there's such an intersection right now with gaming and creators, and like what you were saying, that gaming is about so much more than just gaming. It's become a real sense of community and creativity. And a lot of what we do is working with influencers who are live streaming. SuperAwesome has a solution that we now have rolled out to have a safer version of live streaming for kids. As you can imagine, there are platforms where you can just openly converse with whoever is on there, but kids want to do what everyone else is doing. And so SuperAwesome's belief has always been to really meet kids where they are. And I think the genie's out of the bottle. Kids are online. There's no getting them off of there.
Right.
And
right.
so when we design our products, we really try to think about making sure that we are able to help them do what they want to do, where they want to go, in a way with guardrails that's safe for them.
So we were talking a bit about parents, being involved in the influencers' lives. But let's pull it back a bit in a world that you and I both live in as parents, keeping up with everything that's happening. What positive advice do you have for our parents who are listening as to how can you help to keep your kids safe today and tomorrow?
I wish I had the perfect answer for that as a parent myself. I have heard FTC Commissioner Slaughter often say, like, this is my job. I do this, like, kids online safety day in and day out. And she has 4 kids, I believe. And she's like, I can't keep up with all the apps and
Right.
all the things that are coming in. And that really resonates with me, because I feel the same way, that I'm like, this is my job. And when my daughter brings me an app and it's asking for my credit card, of course I know why, but I still have the same reaction as any parent, which is like, I'm not giving this my credit card.
Right.
And so I think that first is to get a good understanding of what your kids want to do online. I think that very much the same way that, like, in real life parenting, we put guardrails. We don't let kids just when they're 7 years old go to the mall by themselves.
Right.
You want to think about, I'm not just going to give my kid an iPad and pretend that they're not savvy enough to figure out how to bypass an age gate and
Right.
start talking to random strangers, or maybe using bad words on there. Like, I think that you have to start from a place of honesty, and then also take the time yourself to really talk to your kids, have an honest conversation about what they want to do on there. I think that the same way that you wouldn't let your kids go to a club for over 18s, don't let them go on social media before it is appropriate for them. And I think that once they do, again, have that open conversation with them, that it's supervised. You can check their accounts and they're going to be set. They have to abide by whatever your standards, your rules are, and have them explain things to you. But I think it's also a good opportunity. I've tried playing Roblox with my daughter a bunch of times, and had some good times. So I feel like trying to get involved, have them show you,
Right.
make sure that you understand. But obviously, like Commissioner Slaughter has said, that's easier said than done. And obviously, parents are super busy. And like the thought of sitting down and reading a privacy policy at the end of the day is not probably what most parents want to do.
Right.
I find it interesting. I don't think most others would. But I think that being aware of what you're doing, where they're going, but also when it comes to your own sharing of information of your kids on your
Right.
own social media, everyone thinks like, oh, it doesn't matter. No one's looking at my account. I can post whatever pictures I want. But I think that the same way that you want your kids to respect what you're telling them, I think there's a lot of kids who are like, don't post that picture. That's embarrassing. And so being respectful
Right.
of what they want as well, but also being aware of the dangers of posting a picture of your kid at their school and tagging it in real time when you are there. Like there are bad people out there. And
Right.
I used to be a social media influencer on a very small scale, but I stopped once I had my daughter because you read all these things. There actually was an article in the New York Times recently. I think it was called Marketplace of Girl Influencers. And it's really
Oh, wow.
interesting. It's about like parents who are running social media accounts for their kids and kind of the darker side of what's going on there. But I think that not just being careful about what your kids are doing, but being thoughtful about what you are doing with regards to social media and your own behavior. And certainly I'm not perfect at that either, but not sitting on your phone all the time. I had my 4-year-old once be like, honey, put down your phone. And I was just like, oh no. So serving as a model.
It's really interesting to talk about this tension between our digital worlds and kind of the real worlds in the space to go into it. And I love that you're spending time with Roblox. I too have spent a lot of real money that turned into Robux, that turned into kind of family experience in the space in there and building worlds, and my daughter coming to me telling me what she needs to buy in the apps in the space that goes into. So it goes without saying that our technology is always changing, right? But the core principles of how we think about protection and privacy and safety are some common threads in there. What advice do you have? We talked about parents, but what advice do you have for the market leaders and the businesses as to how they should think about embracing new technology, but with an understanding of these kind of core principles of privacy, protection, and safety?
Yeah. So I think that something I think that's really important is how much these younger generations value their own privacy.
Right.
They're really all about having companies respect that. And I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, like that wasn't really a thing. I think even as I got older, it was kind of like, ooh, like free content. I don't care. But I think that this generation really cares about ensuring that their privacy is protected and also respected. And I think that they really do crave these non-toxic environments. They don't want to be exploited. Right. They don't want their data to be exploited. So I think that it's worth companies really thinking about how they should do things responsibly, not just from out of the goodness of their own hearts, but because I think that it's so important for reaching their audiences and getting their audiences engaged with them. I think that we've seen this trend away from targeted advertising. I think that a lot of the younger generations, they're unreachable because they're browsing online in privacy mode. They're setting it up saying apps can't track them. And so I think we've really seen this move to contextually trying to reach kids without data. And that's what SuperAwesome does. We do contextual advertising. And to say contextual advertising is still really built on all kinds of data. It's just not personal data. And so I think that it's important for companies to kind of come to terms with this. And I think there has been this misconception that, oh, if we can't get targeted ads and do that, that we can't reach this audience and it's harder to measure them. So I think that coming to terms with that and understanding that is really important. I think that understanding also that how important gaming is and going online for companies in general.
So as marketers, we often come to our work with a toolkit, with a set of skills that we have or resources or templates or approaches that help us navigate our world as marketers. As we think about what's needed in 2024 or going into 2025, are there any suggestions or things that you believe that marketers should add to their toolkit now to help them navigate marketing to kids and teens and young adults?
Yeah, I think that having a strategy to specifically reach kids and teens, obviously it depends on what that product is that you're trying to sell, but I think
Right,
that acknowledging them as their own audience rather than pushing in teens to your young adult strategy and then hoping that that
right,
captures some of the kids. And SuperAwesome has a ton of research on why they are such an important audience and the influence that they hold over the family, but also even once they reach the teen years as
right.
customers themselves. And so I think that thinking about that and how you can reach them is really important. But I think that also considering going into some platforms and, whether it's gaming, whether it's social media, thinking about how you can reach your audiences in there. But I think that once you do that, that also begs the question of how can you do that contextually and in a way that is going to be appropriate for those audiences that you're trying to reach.
So we talk a lot about kind of these unexpected moments in marketing. So, Katie, I'm going to ask you this question. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, I first wanted to be a princess, and then I wanted to be a teacher, which is kind of, I think, sort of related.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. But my mom was a teacher. I loved making bulletin boards. So I really always loved things involving kids and all of that. And then I went to law school and thought of how can I do this in a way that is legal. And so this is how
Right,
I kind of found myself in this marketing and advertising and kid teen intersection, which is something I never really knew would exist, or, it didn't necessarily exist when I was growing up. But I think I got a little princess teacher. We do have an educational program here. It's called KidAware. And so I'm kind of living out my teacher dreams. On kidaware.com, we have self-service courses that anyone can use and take that teach you about all different kinds of things, whether it's online privacy for kids and teens or how to make appropriate disclosures. And then we also do live sessions for our customers and a lot of other different audiences. So I'm still getting to be a teacher in some regard.
it's really cool to kind of think about that because so much of what you're doing today, as you said, didn't exist when we were growing up, right? To think about the space and just in the past 10 years, the growth of technology and the platforms. So one of the things that I love to do is kind of think about what's next and where you see excitement about the future. When you look at what's ahead for you and SuperAwesome for this year, what do you get excited about?
So it's a very exciting time for us. We have just become newly independent again from Epic, who still remains one of our investors. So we're excited to have them believe so strongly in the products and mission, but to have that freedom now to kind of pursue our core specialty, which are kids and teens. And so we're really returning to how we can serve our customers and those core audiences. We have a year ahead that is have some exciting things planned. We're expanding our engagement with our ad platform. We're continuing to develop our gaming and creator products,
Oh, nice. Yes.
making sure that we're kind of leveraging all of that world and global experience. And we're also leaning a lot into video. I think that YouTube, as you know, is the number one platform where kids are really going, watching videos and seeing a lot of ads, but it wasn't built for kids. The way that it is set up still, many videos still might be collecting personal
Right.
information and being used to then target advertising. And so we have really honed in on our product that allows companies to reach customers contextually. And so we offer, there's 65 additional vetting criteria to make sure that customers, through our human and AI moderation, that we are making sure that those advertisers are showing up next to not just appropriate content, but relevant content so that they're reaching who they want to reach, but in a contextual and safe way that doesn't make use of anyone's data.
So as we go back and forth and we toggle between the businesses and the actual kids who are using it and the parents, what do you think parents should be excited about for the upcoming year? What would excite you as a parent thinking about gaming and digital platforms and what could be there? I know we always have conversations about the scary things.
Yeah. And then I think that that's in the news plenty. Certainly everyone is definitely aware. I think that aside from that, I think that there are some really cool things happening. I think that having brands really take notice of the so-called metaverse and gaming worlds and wanting to be a part of it, I'm really excited because I think that having them invest there and create, it's when brands come in and create content, they are the ones that are really investing in high quality content. They're concerned. They want to make sure that things are done safely, appropriately, and working with companies like SuperAwesome to do that. So I'm excited because I think that we're going to keep seeing more and more quality content coming to these platforms like Roblox. It's interesting to see how it has evolved. I'm very excited about that, to see how that changes over the year and to see whatever the next trend is after the metaverse and what's coming next.
So how do you stay on top of what's coming next? You talked a little bit about it in the FTC example and kind of keeping up, but I'm curious, how do you find signals as to what's coming next in these spaces?
So I think we have the benefit at SuperAwesome that we are global. And so we're able to see kind of on a global scale, like the UK has really been leaders in a lot of the age appropriate design code stuff. And so we often do a lot of consultations with organizations like the ICO, which is the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK. And I think that that allows us to get some insight into how they're thinking, where things are going to go, and making sure that we attend all these events. We're talking with the regulators. We're also talking with companies and talking about how they see it. We work really closely with KRU. I have a wonderful relationship with their director over there, and we make sure that we really have a sense of how they're thinking about new regulations or new news articles as they come out, to make sure that everything that we're doing, we try to make sure that is going to keep us ahead of the curve. But yeah, I think having that global perspective and also getting to work across so many industries and see what so many of these brilliant companies are doing and how they're approaching these issues has really helped inform what we do. I think that by and large, most companies want to do the right thing, and they are putting a ton of effort into thinking about how that should be done. And so working with them and their legal and policy teams has been really great.
Yeah, you actually leaned in. I was going to ask you about that as to what the general sentiment is on how companies as an industry, companies working together are thinking about this. And you kind of leaned into that companies are seeing this as the worthwhile investment and work that they should do more than not.
Yeah, definitely. We've worked with KRU. They had a working group about like the metaverse and how companies should be thinking about that. They had put out a warning, I think it was last year, just saying like, hey, everyone, let's put you on notice. Our guidelines apply in the metaverse and whatever that is and whatever that becomes. And so then you have to say like, okay, these guidelines were obviously not written with online gaming, especially like Roblox, certain things in mind. And so how do you adapt them and interpret them? And so I think working with the regulators and thinking about it with the companies collaboratively has been really helpful.
Well, one of the things that strikes me as kind of really important in the way you've approached it with your KidAware program is your training program just doesn't stop at one entry point. You're working with the developers and coders. You're working with the marketers and the strategists, but also the agencies and the organizations, which kind of speaks to the fact that this is a complex challenge that every component part of the enterprise needs to be aware and needs to be engaged in. Have you seen any greater successes with organizations that take the time to have all of their component parts involved in this, understanding that it's the developer, marketers, and organizations' responsibility versus just one division or one team or one person?
Definitely. I think also a lot of what SuperAwesome does is cover all of those things, and to some degree what we offer when we work with a company, for example, to create a gaming activation, whether it's their own game or an integration into another game that already exists, is we help them think about, let's make sure the concept is appropriate for kids, let's make sure that's being disclosed appropriately, let's make sure when the developer is going through and creating that game, that if they're on a boat, that they're wearing a life jacket. If they're on a bicycle, they're wearing helmets. Like all the things that KRU has been really interested in making sure is shown in advertising. We try to make sure across our ecosystem that we are implementing all of those things at every step of the way. And so once that game is created, then we are working with our influencer team to make sure that that is being rolled out with all of those protections in mind and disclosures, and making sure that the kids are being treated fairly by their parents. And then we take those videos that the influencers make, and they're so wonderful and creative, and then we will turn those into cut downs and turn them into ads that we then will run across our Awesome Ads marketplace. And again, make sure that they're disclosed properly, that we have safe publishers that we're running them across. So I think that SuperAwesome kind of has the way that we are set up helps ensure that like at every step of the way from end to end that we've got you covered.
So it's always great to talk to you, and it's been really informative and revealing to kind of think about all these changes and the great work that you're doing. I would ask as we close, what advice would you have for a young marketer entering the space who's going into marketing and they know their product audience are teens? What advice would you have?
I would say to understand that you are allowed to reach them. We have so many companies that come to us and they're so scared to approach that teen audience and even kids as well. And sometimes the first thing we have to do is convince them that not only are you allowed to reach them, you just have to make sure you're following certain guidelines and keeping things in mind, but you should be reaching them. They are an important audience. And as long as you're doing it appropriately, that's really going to benefit, especially if it's a teen directed product or service, it's really going to help you.
And then what advice do you have for parents like ourselves to help us navigate and survive these teenagers?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm not there yet. I have a 7-year-old, but we say she's 17.
I know. I'm looking back from teenage to you. Yes.
Like, you tell me, you got a teenager at home. I can use that. I think what I have done with my 7-year-old is explain to her, do you know what advertising is? Like, do you know that they are trying to get you to buy something? When she watches these unboxing videos or other videos that, maybe are even less obvious that the child has been paid, I try to get her to think about it with a critical eye. And she now will see things that maybe are more subtle forms of advertising. And she'll be like, oh, that's an ad. They're trying to sell me that. And she gets really excited about it. So I think just media literacy and trying to explain to them like the basics, the way that we do with any other area of parenting. But I'll let you know how it works in a few years.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to say on behalf of our entire community of marketers and industry and parents and creators and brands, thank you for all the work that you and SuperAwesome are doing to build a better and safer internet for the next generation. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Marketing And. It's been incredibly revealing and informative to talk about all these spaces of influencer, video games, advertising, kids and teens in a digital space. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me and for having the discussion about kids and teens and all of the cool things that go with them.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Marketing And. We encourage you to find out more about the American Marketing Association, AMA, at ama.org. We encourage you to explore all the offerings that SuperAwesome has to help you become a better marketer and brand leader in the space of kids online, and also to help you as a parent navigate the space. Thank you once again. I am Bennie Johnson, AMA CEO, and this has been Marketing And.